Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai, and look, a warm welcome to everybody for our council meeting of Wednesday, the 4th of September 2024. A warm welcome to those in the gallery, members of the public, and also online. Just before we get into our order of business, just a bit of housekeeping and safety procedures, and the fire and emergency side of things. Our fire exits are obviously the green signs as you've entered. Unlike the event of an emergency, if we could evacuate to the assembly area at the clock tower to Maraehine, the square, just outside. In terms of health and safety, it is a non-smoking facility and vaping facility. And again, unlike the event of a defibrillator, that is located outside the customer services on the ground floor. Any incidences, please just report those to our administration here. The meeting's being recorded. It's been live streamed on our council's YouTube channel. And if I could just ask officers, if they are speaking, if they could perhaps just, in the first instance, say their name and perhaps title. That'll keep everybody online understanding who's speaking. All right, we have a couple we've got a councillor, Zabellin, online, Katie Zabellin, and our CE, Wade Crockett's online as well. So, before we get into that, I'll ask the Deputy Mayor to open our meeting with karakia.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship. Tū tawa mai I runga, tū tawa mai I raro, tū tawa mai I roto, tū tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tāe ki e. Kia tautoko hoki au te mihi nā te koromātua kia kingi tū heitia mō tona matenga. O tira rātau katoa te motu kua mate. Ka tautoko, ka inoi atu, ka tuku aroha nui, kia rātau o tira ki te whānau. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That before we get into the order of business, I just want to acknowledge the passing of a couple of significant people, one especially, and of course the passing of the Māori King, Kingi Tu Heitia, of the Kingitanga movement, and obviously a great loss for Māoridom. He passed away peacefully last week after poor health and heart surgery, but just a few days after his 18th anniversary of his coronation. So the city's honoured the Māori King with flags being flown at half-mast, and I've penned a letter on behalf of council to go to the Kingitanga movement, sending our condolences. And I was just watching TV last night and saw the many thousands of people making their way to Ngaruawahia to pay their respects, and I think the tangi is tomorrow. So our condolences are there. The others, Garrick Murfitt, some may not know him, but he was a former chair of Horizons. He passed away also last week. He was a Tararua farmer, a good friend to the city. He was a councillor from 1992 and chair from 2006 to 2010. He did a lot bringing the rural and city urban people together. He led the region through quite a difficult time with the aftermath of the floods. And was a strong instigator in the Manawatu River Leaders Accord. So if I could just ask us to perhaps stand for a moment's silence, please. Thank you. Right, we will now go to our order of business, which is apologies, and we don't have any apologies. Okay. Moving through to number 3, which is notification of any additional items. I haven't received any declarations of interest, other than I have one with number 9. So I'll just vacate the chair and the Deputy Mayor will take over. Public comment. I haven't received anything for public comment. Nothing from the floor. Okay. Okay, number 6, which is around confirmation of our minutes. And this is our minutes, which is page 7 of your papers, and the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting the 7th of August 2024, Part 1, public be confirmed as a true and correct record. I'm happy to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Are there any matters arising? There being none, we will vote, please. That's passed 15 votes for and 1 abstention. Thank you. All right, moving through to our reports, and we have one here on a pretty important program for us, which Nature Calls, and the program governance, methodology and communication update. And perhaps if I could invite Mike Moynihan, and is Anna here? Anna Lewis, who's the project manager. Thank you. Councillors, page 15 of your papers. Oh, I'm sorry, we've got Francis and Paula here as well. Welcome. I'm Stan Tech.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Mike Monahan, aho, manager for Three Waters. Good morning, your worship and councillors. I was going to do a brief introduction for the team, but the mayor's just done that. But we do have Anna, Francis and Paula from the project team to help us through this this paper today. So I'm pleased to be bringing this paper, the Nature Calls Programme Governance, Methodology and Communications Update. And this is the first update on the programme since the June the 10th resolution to review the BPO options. We do have a brief PowerPoint presentation that the team will talk us through. However, it's important to note before we start that since we wrote the paper, you'll be aware that the government have released a statement around wastewater national standards and how Taumata Aroaia, our regulator, will be working on a set of standards for wastewater discharges. There's a note in the paper in section 3 that suggests that the timeline for this development of the standards could be mid to late 2025, and this has the potential to have quite a large impact on any selected BPO option. So therefore, the timeline and methodology in this paper that we've presented today will inevitably need to be reviewed. We believe that there will be still a substantial amount of work in this programme that we can carry on with on a no regrets basis, and this work will be required regardless of any discharge standard changes. So please bear this in mind as we present this to you today, that we will need to come back with a revised timeline when we understand a little bit more. So we will just take a few minutes to run you through. Does this thing? Next. Help.
Just check. Oh, yep, you're on.
There we go, we're on. Right, okay, so a very quick overview. What this programme is about is identifying how we're going to treat and discharge our wastewater for the next 30 to 50 years. In our current consent that we're currently operating to, condition 23B gives us the outline of how we need to come about a new best practical option. Back in 21, Council will remember that we selected a BPO and we went ahead and wrote a consent application which was submitted to Horizons, and that consent application is still in and lodged. But part of this year's LTP deliberations, elected members resolved that the programme is currently unaffordable and that we need to go back and have a look at some alternative BPO options, noting that the programme should be capped at 480 million. So this is where we're up to now. The team have come together where we've put a programme together which we think it's time for Council to have a look at, and the team here are going to run us through a few slides that talk to that program. Next slide, if somebody can do that for me, because this ain't working. There we go. Just the right one. The right one. That one. Yeah, that's it.
Tēnā koutou. My name is Frances Loshkin. I'm a Senior Principal Planner at Stantec, and I'm the Project Delivery Manager for the Stantec and PDP team. We have been working with the PNCC technical team over the last month in developing a methodology for the review of the previous BPO options. With the main intent that the methodology would be delivered as efficiently but also as robustly as possible, conscious always of the timeframes and the length of time that the previous process took and not wanting to do unnecessary work. The methodology that we've developed is fundamentally based on the work that was done for the previous BPO consideration. So for those of you who were involved over the last 5 years, hopefully this funnel diagram looks reasonably familiar. It started with a very long list and then gradually worked its way down to the short list of options that you considered. What we have done in developing a process for the next step in this is to go back and look at those phases and recheck whether any of the information has changed that would mean that we would have to repeat steps. The ideal in looking at options again, as the council directed, is to end up with a list that you would consider again that is not as long as the original long list. So our ideal would be to start at the shortlist process, because it means that the process is much shorter than if you have to go back to the long list. But the first step, understandably, is to develop a list of options, and then we get to see from there how many options we have, and therefore what sort of a process we would have to run. Once we are down to a short list of options, it then runs through the same process that you ran through before in terms of a multi-tool assessment, which has various different limbs that feed into ranking the different options that you have, and then your final BPO assessment. But what we've done is tried to develop a methodology that reuses as much of the existing information as possible, so we're not repeating work unnecessarily, but that maintains consistency with what you did previously, so that as the process moves through later parts, it's less open to challenge if it has followed at least roughly the same process as was followed before. It means you're comparing apples with apples.
Kia ora tātou, Anna Lewis, the PNCC Project Manager. So as Mike suggested, and hopefully you can read this on your screens or on the slide pack, we had developed this methodology to be submitted with a paper prior to the Te Mata Arawai announcement about the wastewater standards. So we just acknowledge at the bottom there that this is subject to change in regards to that time frame, and we need to take account as to how we will incorporate that into the project methodology to develop a BPO, as Frances has just described. The purpose of this methodology is to incorporate the funnel diagram that Frances has just outlined on the previous slide. And in terms of timeframes, the project team are currently sitting in step 1, and that's in order to develop what is called our draft long list. So that's something that's coming together at the moment. The council paper that was submitted talks through the steps, but from there moving through to a short list, depending on how many options we come up with, either we go through a traffic light screening or not. If we have less than 10 options, as Frances described, any way that we can streamline the process as much as possible whilst keeping it robust and defendable is a key component of what this work package includes. From there, step 4 and 5, we have noted public engagement, but given the Te Mata Arawai standards announcement, we need to consider when public engagement would happen, ideally, and Olivia Wicks is here in terms of the comms, but how we would go to public engagement if the standards coming out, we may not want to engage with the public until such time as we have certainty. So that's another consideration we need to take into account. Step 6 is the BPO assessment. And step 7, we were originally looking at a BPO decision to come to council, and we've timed a lot of this around the local body elections, also when council meet, given the council don't meet in January, so we had sort of programmed all the steps so to incorporate council meetings. But as I say, we do need to revise this given the announcement that's come out recently. This is the same time frame, just shown slightly differently, so it might be a bit clearer, a bit easier to understand, but happy to take questions on that rather than go through that program again.
Thank you, councillors. I think that's the end of a brief presentation, and the team are now happy to take any questions that you may have for us.
All right, thank you, Mike and team. So you're looking at that timeline. There was a decision of September 25. Is that still?
No, so just to try and recap a little through you, Mr. Chair, that was the original timeframe that we was aiming for, but with the announcement from the government and Taumata Arowai, we believe that will extend that decision period.
So it'll be a new council that actually decides. Yeah. Okay.
Just to be really clear on what this means is that, so a new standard, comes out and say, we think as earliest as August next year, but until we know that, effectively, we don't know what we're consenting against. So it'll basically set a really clear standard that this is the level that you have to meet to get a consent effectively. So the issue that we have is that up until the time we know that, we're sort of just having to make assumptions or guesses and what have you. So I guess what we're signalling is that we've done this current timeline really to try and work in with the elections so that we can get the key decisions made before in this term of council. Given the likelihood that it may not be at least until next year that we know what it is. There's some work we think we can probably do before then, but there'll be some critical decisions that won't be able to be made after that. So as the Mayor just indicated, it's virtually certain that the key decisions will need to be made by the new council.
All right. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. My question relates to the assessment methodology that's outlined on page 17. In particular, 4.3 outlines the project objectives. The 7th one down is that it's affordable and cost effective. I don't believe that objective was met in the first process. So what will be different in the next process that would ensure that that objective is met?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So Council have been very clear that 480 million is plus inflation is what your expectations are for this project to cost no more than. So that will be quite a strong driver for options that we bring back for consideration.
Okay, and just in terms of the steps that are outlined on the next page, step 5, the multi-criteria and assessment tool. Previously, the cost weighting was quite small. I think it was 10% in the previous process. Will the weighting, how the weightings are allocated, will that be revisited through the next process?
I might just ask perhaps Paula or Francis if they've got a response to that question.
Yes, that's part of the development of that part of the methodology.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. This is a question about the government announcement, really, so you might not be able to answer it. But I just wondered if there was a plan that we're aware of yet for public engagement by Taumata Arowai on the national standards before that's implemented. Will our community have an opportunity to input into that decision?
Councillor, I don't think I can answer that question. I don't have that information.
Yeah, I thought that was likely. Thanks, Mike.
Councillor Harpiter.
probably leads on from Councillor Bond's question. It was around step 5 and public feedback. I just wanted to unpack that a little bit more to understand. It kind of got glossed over a little bit when you were outlining it. What will you be doing for public feedback so that we understand that a little bit more?
Okay, I'm going to ask Olivia Wicks to come and perhaps answer that question. Thank you.
Good morning. I guess back again before this decision, we were looking at a similar process to what we did back in 2020 and 2021. So going back out and getting public feedback on probably a short list. So again, just a few options, not 10 or 12 options. I guess Mike alluded to it earlier. Is until we know what those treatment standards are, that also is obviously connected to the cost. So there would be a risk if we got public feedback before we knew the treatment and cost that I would probably hazard a guess that would probably almost need to go out for a second round because that would potentially sway people's opinions as to what their option was. So I guess our kind of key message in the report is that once we figure out this timeline, we'll be able to come back with a more thorough plan on what that public engagement is. I guess one thing I would say is that we are obviously continuing to update the public throughout the process. So we're currently working on a big overhaul of the big website stuff. We are required to give 3 monthly updates to Horizons that will all be publicly available. So we will keep continuing to keep everyone in the loop as we go on.
So opportunities for public to engage in the process, how will they be able to do that?
My advice would be that we would want to wait until you have probably got towards a shorter list options, which is a similar process to what we did previously. I guess the LTP gave us a good steer on what some people think, and I guess the other thing is we'll be doing some community consultation and feedback on local water done well as well, so that will be like another I guess opportunity to get people's views about the water steps. I might just see if, Francis, did you have any, I guess, other thoughts on that?
I think only really in support of what Liv has just said, that the development of a standard by Taumata Arawai does mean that I think you need to wait on public consultation until you have a clearer idea of what the effect of that standard will be. The methodology that has been developed allows for that, allows for the technical work that's necessary to inform understanding the options to go ahead, and would need to be done anyway, I think, before you went out into public consultation, so that you were going out with fully informed options to the public.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, team. Possibly a question for Mike, but I'll see. Just a question around the signals from government on their announcement regarding the standards. Is the anticipation that we'll be held to a higher standard or a lower standard or about an equivalent standard to where we are today? So effectively, are we planning that whatever we do today, we're going to have to go above that, or do we anticipate potentially it'll be below what we're planning for today? Because that makes an impact on our risk, I guess.
I think perhaps, Councillor, the only way I could answer that question, because they haven't started to develop the standards yet, but the only way I could answer that question is to say that I don't believe, I'm not sure if I phrase this right, I believe they're going to build the standards to be more applicable to the receiving environment where the discharge may be, because there's numerous receiving environments. I think they're going to make it easier for councils or water service providers to be able to achieve the discharge standards, so there may be some consistency of approach. I think it's difficult. I don't know if I can answer to say it's going to be easy, the standards are going to be higher or lower, but I think it's going to be more consistent approach to standards.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Zabellin online.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. That's actually relates to my question as well, which was about the standards. And particularly, I thought I had read some indication that there'd be an approach from the government that whether the standards were higher or lower, they wouldn't be able to be exceeded through consent conditions. Is that your understanding?
Has anybody got an opinion on that?
Morena, everyone. I'm Paula Hunter. I'm the planning lead on the on this project. Look, we've only got what the information that's been provided in fact sheets from the Ministry for the Environment. But what I have read there is that, yes, Councillor, you're correct in thinking that the consent authorities can't set higher, more stringent standards than the standard that's specified. But there was this thing around exceptional circumstances. So, so there could be some situations that, you know, that if there are exceptional circumstances, the standard could be exceeded. So we don't know what those exceptional circumstances would be.
Sure, thank you. Thanks very much. So just touching on what Chris was saying earlier, if we don't know what we're consenting against, we also don't, as a lower standard, we also have a sort of a ceiling that we couldn't really exceed either. So does that, what kind of constraint impact does that give us when we're trying to settle on a BPO with neither a high or low benchmark really clearly delineated?
Well, I suppose you've still got to go through a resource consent process. So that's my understanding from the fact sheets that have come from the Ministry. So, so meeting the standard doesn't automatically give you a resource consent. You've still got to go through that process. But how that plays out in the consent process is unknown at the moment.
Thanks, Paula. And just
maybe for Mike. Maybe I can just add, and unfortunately the experts will be very precise in their answers, but given I'm not constrained there because I'm not an expert, but look, I think one of the things will be is that it will create a really clear standard of what you have to meet. At the moment, the process can be quite, you just don't know what you're going to end up with because there's a whole lot of variables that will take it into account. What I think will happen, it'll make the consenting process a lot more straightforward, because basically if you're discharging to land, there will be a very clear standard, and it'll be effectively what we describe as an end of pipe standard. So what is the quality of the water is that coming out of the end of that pipe without having to worry about other impacts. So you've got a really clear level to design to, and as long as you can show that whatever's behind that will meet that standard, then that's pretty much as far as it should go. So look, there's a lot of unknowns at the moment, but if you sort of take a step back and think about what the government's trying to achieve through that, it is to make it a lot more straightforward to consent.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. And just my final question was about the water services delivery plan delivered within 12 months, but then not expecting wastewater standards for 12 months, and whether that intersects and what impact that might have on our progressing.
Yeah, it's. I think it's fair to say that that's part of the challenge here, isn't it? That to deliver a water service delivery plan when you're halfway through a major sort of capital project like this is going to present some challenges. So they're the issues that we will have to work through. Councillor, don't have the answer for you right now, but they're the issues that we're going to be facing and we'll work through.
Right, thank you very much. That's all from me, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mike, Anna, Francis, and Paula. Probably start off with questions that kind of build on Councillor Zabellan's. Paula, you indicated that the consent authority cannot set a higher standard. We're not the consent authority, we're the applicant. So from the applicant's point of view, what optionality is there?
Sorry, so when I said the consent authority, I meant Horizons. So, they're the decision makers in this process. So, in terms of the rest, could just explain a little bit more about what you're.
Yeah, so you're saying, I get it that Horizons, well understand Horizons is the consenting authority, and that they will be constrained, if I've heard your answer correctly, they will be constrained in terms of what standards they can require of us. What I'm trying to understand is how that actually affects optionality on the applicant side, and whether the applicant is driven to a minimum compliance, or is there optionality for the applicant?
Well, for the applicant, I suppose that they need to meet the standard that is set by the government. I suppose you could choose to have a higher standard, but the bottom line would be to meet the standard.
So there is optionality, is what I'm hearing.
So I might just see if I can assist here, Councillor. Just caveat this by it's very early days and there's not a lot of detail around this yet. But it does seem as though there will be optionality if council decide to exceed the standards, as Mr. Dyberg said about the end of pipe standards. If council wish to exceed that, then that will be at the applicant's behest, I guess.
Right. Great. Thanks. That's helpful. So thinking about that in terms of the work that's in front of the team for the next number of months, would you be taking a view that does provide for some optionality, or are you expecting to focus into a kind of minimum compliance type model?
Oh, I think it's probably fair to say that we haven't got the maturity of the programme because of the recency of the announcement. We haven't had those discussions yet. But we'd be happy to take guidance from councillors if you have an opinion on that.
Right, thank you. A couple questions within the report. 4.6, which talks about the current consent, makes a statement that it's the highest level of treatment. And I just wanted to understand, is that the highest level within the short list or the highest level within the long list? My understanding was that there were some higher levels.
I might say, my understanding is that it was the highest technical level of treatment that we considered, amongst the list that was presented to council.
Of the short list or the long list? I guess where I'm getting to is reverse osmosis, which I'd understood was a higher level than we had actually opted into.
Yeah. So if you wanted, if you want to consider reverse osmosis, then sure you can go higher than standard wastewater treatment if you wanted to, convert that to more potable water standards. You certainly could go higher than what we're proposing.
Right. Thank you. Two final questions. One is around the project governance group. It says there's an independent advisor there, and I wondered kind of who they're independent of and who they're accountable to.
Sorry, is there...
Gosh, sorry, I don't have the specific page reference. It's in one of the diagrams.
Yeah, so that's in the project governance group. So it's, and this is all proposed is that group would be made up of the chief executive, the GM of infrastructure, the CFO, iwi representative, and an independent advisor. I think the independent advisor would be providing independent advice to that group for the governance of the project.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so I guess I'm trying to understand what we mean by independent in this context, given that my experience so far is a relatively small ecosystem of
Sorry,
advisors.
Councillor, we'll just get the CA to respond.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess certainly independent of council is probably what we were thinking. So what we would be doing, so throughout the process, and you'll see in the presentation, there was reference to independent external industry experts and what have you. We are envisaging developing effectively a panel of outside experts that would be certainly independent of council, but also importantly independent of our current technical advisors, so that we can get some some different views. So we envisage those independent advisors would work very closely with Stantec, for example, so that we work seamlessly as part of the process. But I think we feel that it's important to go out and just test the thinking, provide us with some independent views around the sort of questions that we should ask to make sure as council we're well informed in terms of pushing and prodding the process. I guess we're very mindful that the previous plan was getting very, very expensive, and we want to be able to give confidence into the process that we are testing every sort of possibility and getting all the independent advice we can around that. So we envisage a different range of advisors that we might get, and then probably one of those people may well be sit on that governance group so that they can provide some independent input into the process at that level.
Thank you. Final question is just around, again, the structures that are put up for the work that's to be conducted in the next year and beyond. It seems that iwi feature quite frequently in the various different structures and inputs, and I just wanted to understand to what extent have we had a conversation with iwi to understand whether or not they're well enough resourced to be actively engaged through multiple engagement points in these structures.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. That is a very good question. Our engagement with iwi to date has been to keep them informed of the changes that are occurring, but we wanted to bring this to council before we took a structure to iwi to get their input into where they might fit into this structure. So we haven't had that particular resource conversation with iwi yet.
Thanks. And so
just to
Sorry, Councillor, we're just... There's multiple questions here.
I was going to be sitting down the other end, but it's a bit hard. There's definitely been some high-level conversations early on in terms of as we've brought this sort of the concept of the governance process together, and so we have had some high-level input, and to get to the point that we knew there would be a high level of comfort around the structure of it. How it works in detail in terms of what people, what resources and what have you, we'll have to work through that detail. But I think at a high level there should be reasonable comfort with what we're proposing.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been following this program for a few years now because I've been in this council right from the start. And I've taken a bit of an amateur interest in it, you say, and quite often on the internet following through what can happen around the world. And I'm astounded how technology in wastewater has changed over the last 5 years. Looking at some places in California, they're turning their wastewater...
Sorry, is this a question?
Yes, it's coming. Into pure drinking water. Now, and I mean pure drinking water. My question is this, when we draw up the short list as such, are all of them going to be discharged to land, or will we be looking at other methods?
Thank you, Councillor. No, we definitely will be looking at a whole range of options and discharge environments. But back to Councillor Naylor's question earlier, we're very conscious of the cost of some of these processes to turn into pure drinking water. So we'll be bringing all feasible options to the table, and they'll be putting that through our long list to short list technical optioneering work.
Very good, thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the update. I've got a few questions. One is around in 4.8, if the suggested 7-step process is not endorsed, etc., the timeline will be delayed and additional costs will be expended. I guess I do have some concerns about us going into this process and using the same methodology that we used last time, because it didn't bring us to a good point, and I think that's what Councillor Naylor said. So what other alternative methodologies have been considered other than just repeating what we did last time?
I might ask one of our planning experts to answer that question.
I suppose we're in a tricky situation in terms of needing to be consistent in the process that was followed last time, because there's various legal requirements around processes and things, and if there was an abrupt change in methodology, then there is this need to be consistent in what we've followed previously. So in terms of other options, what was followed with the multi-criteria assessment and things are standard processes that are accepted by the courts, so they're well recognised process. I suppose, and as was mentioned previously by Councillor Miller, there's the ability to put greater emphasis on certain criteria that are that are important to council and things. So, so there's mechanisms like that to put greater emphasis, say, on the cost and affordability matters as well. So there's mechanisms within the methodology, I suppose, that can be adjusted as long as it's explained well.
So there isn't an alternative methodology?
Well, the alternatives to MCAs are around more like, I suppose, business cases, the cost-benefit analysis process and things, but those cost-benefit analysis is not taking into account, I suppose, things such as the environment and cultural concerns and the like. So that the MCA process, as I said, is a recognised process by the courts, and it's standard. Most councils with projects like this adopt those MCA processes. Waka Kotahi use them all the time, so they are standard practice.
Okay, I'll just leave that for a minute. In 8.2, there's talk about the work continuing. Work programs already underway will continue and technical work will continue. Why are we continuing with work when we don't know what standards we need to achieve? We don't know what our final decision will be about the type of discharge and where it will be going. I don't understand why we're continuing to do work when we don't even know where we're headed.
I'll just ask the CE, so acting CE to.
Excellent question, and I'll just sort of remind you that there was that section 3 that was added in after the paper was written. So I guess we'd completed the paper, and rather than try and in the space of a couple of days rewrite again from scratch, all we've done is sort of put the note in to say, look, late breaking news is a standard has now been announced. It's going to change the process. So you're absolutely right. We wouldn't just sort of box on with work. I guess that the key next steps now, assuming you're comfortable, will be really to have a look at the program that we've laid out for you. Think about when this sort of new standard comes in, and I guess we'd only be looking at doing no regrets work between now and then, so there's no point making big assumptions about what the standard might be and then working towards that. So we're going to have to be very careful at not sort of wasting time and money on work until we're doing it. So yeah, so what we'll be doing from here is going back, having a look at this program. I guess we're sort of not really sure quite how to handle this meeting, so we thought we'd show you the program to give you a sense of the sort of things that we need to do. But now it is going to be a lot more elongated, we'll have to think about what we can do between now and when the standard comes, to exactly to your point, Councillor.
Okay, well, that's reassuring. I've just got a question about the standard, and I suppose it's a hypothetical question, really. But if we were a couple of years further on and we'd already got our consent and we're starting to build, the standard wouldn't be applied retrospectively to us, would it?
I think, and somebody with an expert in the RMA might be able to answer that question.
I'll just do my best. It does depend on how that standard is written and whether they say, you know, that it can be applied retrospectively. So that's, yeah, it is up to the government to determine how those things will be applied.
Well, now, would that not be quite unusual in terms of RMA processes to apply a standard retrospectively without any kind of transition period or time to reach the new standard?
Yeah. There are practices at the moment where if a regional council writes a new plan, that they can review consent conditions to bring consents in line with the new rules of the plan. So there is that ability to do that. So there could be that option to, you know, because your consent will have the limits that you need to meet at the end of your pipe from your wastewater treatment plant. So there could be that ability to review those conditions in light of the new standard.
Would it be fair to say that we're waiting for the new standard to come out because we think that that will be to our advantage?
I'll let
Yeah, it's probably unfair to ask the consultants that question. So
well, I'm happy for someone to answer it.
Look, I guess the best way to answer that would be to say that we're really mindful that the previous plan has become unaffordable, and that we need to be very, very careful going forward to select the best practical option that is in that affordable range. I guess I'm sitting here hoping that the new standards give us more flexibility on what is consentable, effectively. It doesn't constrain us in terms of which option we choose, as long as whatever we choose is consentable. So I think we still have some flexibility as an organisation around what we want to build, as long as it will meet that standard. So this probably gives us a little bit more flexibility, I guess.
So if a member of the public were to ask us, why are you delaying with this? Why are you not just getting on with it? What would your answer be?
Well, I think, waiting for the standards. But I guess the thing is, we don't know where the standards are going to land. They could be, for all we know, they could be higher. You know, there is no guarantee that this process is going to make the standards lower. It might make them more consistent in terms of saying we know exactly what the standard is, but we could go ahead, let's say, assuming that the current plan is still roughly what would be consentable, only to find it's not. So, look, I think that's probably highly unlikely, but we just don't know. And that's the problem that we have. We don't know. So I know a lot of the answers that we're giving today sound a bit wishy-washy, but it's basically because we know no more than what's been said publicly, and what's been said publicly is very, very little. Mike and I have been to Wellington to try and find out a little bit more information, and we've got a little bit more clarity around, that it's not just one standard, but it's a standard for different environments. So it could be circa 12 standards, for instance. We also believe, we also understand that it will be an end-of-pipe standard. So, but that's about as much as we know.
So can I will get the CE to speak. He's online. No, he doesn't want to now.
Oh.
No,
Can't
you
hear.
need to.
about the what's called the project governance group, but it doesn't actually have any governance in it. It's all management and staff and iwi representatives. So why has that been called a governance group? It's not got any governance in it.
So just to clarify, it's project governance. Just like, for instance, you know, we have a lot of internal governance around our projects, which is, I suppose you call it small g governance. You know, it's still overseen and providing, you know, guidance and around the project. It's not intended to be the governance that is provided by council.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions sparked by Councillor Johnson's questions. In terms of how much, the comment was made that only no regrets work will be done between now and next August when the standards are clarified. How much no regrets work is there left to do that hasn't already been done?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We believe that the technical review, up to step 4, the technical review of current options, and as the Deputy CEO has just said about looking at alternate options to bring into the process, regardless of what final standards will be, is looking at processes and technologies that we can bring in and then doing the technical review of those. We believe that's work that has no regrets that we would need to do regardless of knowing the standards.
Okay, thank you. And just in terms of the further explanation around the time of the way this paper was developed and the recommendations that we have, the 4 recommendations, are clearly the second recommendation is been added in there following the government announcement. The first, third and fourth recommendations, are those all still relevant given that there's so much uncertainty about where the standards will land? And further to that, I guess my question is, can we put those aspects of the process on pause until next August and then determine the path ahead once there's more clarity around what the standards might look like?
I believe that they are still appropriate, but with the caveat that the timeline within those processes would be subject to change because of the announcement from government.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation and answering all the questions. Just as the questions have been kind of sort of coming forth, a thought has really sort of popped into my mind is that, like, we're in this environment of over the next 12 months of kind of conjecture and kind of a lot of uncertainty. What is our thinking in terms of perhaps any stop-go points and for council over the next 12 months as we develop the program?
I believe that we'd need to just have some more clarity from the government on the actual time frames for the standards announcements. They've just said mid to late next year, so we don't quite know what that looks like yet. We may come to a point, as I've just suggested, we may complete the work in step 4 and not be able to proceed with step 5 until we have more clarity. So there may be a stop-go point there, but we haven't had that conversation as a team yet to develop that thought. So yeah.
Okay, so I guess probably what I'm getting at here is that if we came to a point during the process whereby we thought that our planning was actually out of step with what the government was actually indicating, would that come back to council, obviously with a decision added, for a decision?
Yeah, it's our intention to bring, as soon as we know more about what the government are announcing and we revise the timeline, it's our intention to bring that back to council.
Great. And between now and sort of September, October next year, we are in constant contact with government in terms of their intentions?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to give you some comfort. So as I said, Mike and I have been down to see Te Mata Awai and try and understand a little bit more. Mike's been volunteered to go on to some of the technical advisory groups so that we've got sort of first-hand information about how those are being developed along the way. So yeah, we'll keep really tight. But I think your point's well made. What we'll be doing is sort of, we're very mindful only to do work that makes sense, but there's still plenty to do. We've got some new options that we need to look at that'll take a bit of time, and there could be quite a bit to do that we could do that will certainly not be wasted. But I guess as those standards start firming up, we'll also be able to start looking. We'll start being able to sort of assess which ones we think are going to be in the sweet spot and which ones aren't.
Thank you, Chris. Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Mike, and the rest of the team. Appreciate you coming in, giving your advice to us. So, councillors, we've got the 4 recommendations there, and around recommendations to council, that council note the proposed BPO assessment methodology as outlined in the memorandum. The council note the timeline of this methodology is subject to change due to the announcements around the National Wastewater Standards. 3, the council note the proposed organisational and governance structure for the next stage of the Nature Calls project as outlined in the memo. And 4, the council note the proposed comms approach for the next stage of the Nature Calls project as outlined in this memo. I'm happy to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Councillors, I didn't say too much, but the CE and I met with Alan Pragnell, the CEO of the Water Regulator, and just to give you an understanding, there's 280 bespoke standards at the moment that are delivered across 16 different regional councils. It's probably one of the most inefficient and complicated and costly processes in the world to go through to get a consent. It's going to be standardised down to 12 national standards to suit the receiving environments, as the officers have indicated, around obviously land, ocean outfalls, various watercourses, possibly hybrids as well. So I do think there'll be a clear standard then. There'll be end of pipe, where that was all up in the air with different regional councils, different people that were looking at things, and there will be some efficiencies, and certainly I think for our position we're better to wait a little bit in terms of what happens in terms of those standards. Currently your standards are here. What some councils and regional councils are trying to achieve is way up there. It's probably going to end up somewhere in the middle is the methodology I was told down in Wellington when I met with them the other week. So I can share and sense your perhaps your nervousness about charging on with anything too much, but it's evident that the officers aren't going to do that. They're going to do absolutely what's necessary. There is a couple of other BPO options that have raised their head. We know about one of them down at the wetlands and the floodgates, so there's certainly options there, and possibly some newer technology options as well. So I think this is a sensible approach. It keeps things, I suppose, in chain, but without going too far ahead of ourselves, knowing that standards, new national standards will come in, and that will set the rules of the game quite clearly. At the moment, we started under a different set of rules, and they're clearly going to change. So if I can ask you to support this, it'll keep the project moving, as I said, with the officers coming back to us. And of course we do have 4 of us on a steering group which have to come back to you regularly on any updates. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This update has been really useful, and I appreciate the officers' work in just outlining what that process forward might look like. It's clearly complicated by this recent announcement by the government, but I don't personally think that it's the end of the world that we need to slow down this process. I do have some concerns around whether that 7th objective, I think it's really important for us not to lose focus of why we're doing this process a second time. That 7th objective, to be affordable and cost effective, whilst this council has endorsed, the majority of this council has endorsed a cap of 480 million plus inflation, or of around 550 million, it's important to remember that we haven't tested that with our community to understand whether that meets that objective according to our community. So whilst new options, maybe we've got some time to explore some new options, I think it's important that that 550 or that 480 plus inflation is not seen as a target, but definitely a cap. And I'm really hopeful that some of the options that are to be developed will be a lot less than that, because I would not like us to have to go through this a third time. If we go out to our community with something around that level, they may well say, no, that's not acceptable or affordable either. So broadly speaking, I think the thing that I feel cautious about this is that we don't just go and do the same process again a second time. We need to think about what we're doing differently to respond to that very clear message from our community about why we're going back and doing this a second time.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I must say it's a very difficult environment to be doing decision making in, because it feels like every week the goalposts shift in a different direction, and it's really hard to make good decisions for the long term when you're on shifting sands. Having said that, I have some misgivings about applying the same methodology again, because we trusted in it last time and it led us to a place where we didn't really want to be. So I'm going to need to be convinced that that process is the best and only one that we can use, and that it might actually take us to a different outcome. Because if you don't change what you're doing, you're going to get the same result again. So I'll sound a note of caution about that. The other thing I have some misgivings around, and I understand that it's not perhaps anything we can change because of the government's timeline, but to put this decision-making as one of the first pieces of business for a new council, I think is decidedly risky, to be honest. I think it'll be very hard for new councillors to get up to speed with the amount of information, the processes that we've been through, the sort of history of the project. And so I would counsel against, if we possibly can, pushing that decision onto a new council. I think that won't necessarily be the best in terms of decision making. The other thing I would say is that I'm cautious about going out to the public again for more consultation. There were several rounds of consultation to get us to this point. Then we've had the long-term plan. I would be agreeing, I think, with Liv's assessment that, we need to know what we're consulting on, that we need to wait until the standards have come out before we start doing more consultation, because otherwise, people are not following the minute detail of this. They'll just see, oh my goodness, council's doing this all over again. And, it causes frustration. It causes frustration even to those of us who do understand why we're doing it. So I think we just need to be careful how it's handled in terms of communications and consultation. Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that we will get more direction from government sooner rather than later, because I think we're in an extremely difficult position at the moment. I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Zabellin online.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to put a differing opinion out there about methodology concerns that have been raised, because I think one of the really good things about using an MCA is that you can change the criteria. So you don't need to throw out the whole methodology. You can just amend the settings of that criteria to reflect the changes, excuse me, that we're wanting to see. And whereas the other options that Paula was describing in such as a business case or cost benefit analysis, I just feel like they're not the right tool. So I am pretty comfortable with using the same concept of an MCA, but just I think that the criteria there would change a little. And just wanted to say kia kaha to all the staff who are working in this environment and trying to navigate it. And we're just doing the best we can in a pretty
Okay. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually reasonably comfortable with what I've heard from from colleagues. Would want to start off just to thank the officers and the consulting team in particular. As others have alluded to, this is, very much trying our patience, and no doubt your patience is being tried even more. So thanks for the ongoing commitment to this project. Obviously, much of what we're facing here is beyond your control, and quite frankly, most of it seems to be beyond ours as well, which is a challenging position indeed. Nature Calls is absolutely a key deliverable for this council and for our communities. It's a key enabler of growth. It's a key enabler of the health of our awa. And I do feel that it's unfortunate that we're now caught up in another cycle, a second cycle, in fact, of central government wading in. We're 7 years into this. We're already millions and millions of dollars in. In fact, we're 21 years into it if you actually reflect on the planning exercise that was done earlier this century, that some of you will recall, that led to the same conclusions. But we've got a situation where the finish line is continuing to drift. Costs are going up over time, patience is going down over time, and our river, and in particular the downstream communities, continue to deal with the consequences of the status quo day in and day out. So I do understand why we're here, but it is disappointing to me. Looking ahead, my view is that as the applicant, we would be wise to ensure our planning maintains optionality so that we go out with differentiated options and not simply being solely driven by a yet-to-be-named standard. What we know is that the water quality in the river is not healthy, and that's simply a fact that we need to face and respond to. The standard, as I understand it from the presentation from the officers and consultants and from answers to questions, is there to drive the consenting authority, and that is fair and good, but I believe that we would be wise to be well informed by that standard, but not 100% driven by it, and that we continue to be informed by our partners, by key stakeholders, by community and wider progress within the catchment. And yes, by the range of drivers, including Councillor Naylor, you'll be very pleased to hear cost, as well as the many other factors that are the ingredients of a robust and future-proofed decision for our community. They deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Councillor Denison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really just highlighting some of the comments that have been made already, but just emphasising around the not repeating the process of the methodology as so closely, because I think there are some tweaks needed, and that's certainly around the weighting of the assessment. And I'll highlight what Councillor Naylor had concerns around the 10% weighting on the financial was just way too low at the time for the comparative costs. And I think that would be one I would want to voice in early if we're repeating through this process as we are. Even the shortlist had some limitations around what we could actually progress at the time, and I know there's some more information to date to I guess measure up the value of those propositions as solutions. So obviously that'll come back to us when we start confirming some of those steps in the timeline. But I still see this as being a multiple stages still yet to go, and for our input still to be guiding this. And this is in light of actually working with our regional councils too, to councils in the region to see how we might work together in this whole great scheme ultimately too. So it's very dynamic. And just the last point I want to raise, which I raised here just in last month, around the concern around the limited communication we have with our community. The opportunity for engagement and to inform them of where we are in different steps of this process is very limited, because it's moving so fast and it's changing, it's dynamic. And I think that's a real unfortunate outcome of this whole project, that our community, to be able to bring them along with us and have their considerations put in has been really very low in the priorities as far as moving at this pace. So that's not on us. That's actually a central government process demand, and I think it's very weak in the ultimate outcome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Harper.
Thank you. Not going to say too many things that are different. Really, I do agree with a lot with what Councillor Johnson has said in terms of don't want to repeat a lot of the methodology that has gone on before that hasn't worked. So I would like to see a change in some of that methodology. But I do want to see some of this process that's on page 33 quickened. I do think it would be good to see it shortened and done a lot quicker and not as slowly as it was outlined today. It'd be good to see the 7 steps done a lot quicker than what was outlined today. So, and also I agree with Councillor Dennison, the engagement really has to happen with our community. I know we've gone out with a long-term plan, but we have to go out and engage with our community. I think that's really, really important. We have to go out there. They want to talk about it. We've had them say they want to talk about it and they want to be engaged no matter what, whether it's 470 or whatever the price tag or what it is. We have to talk to them about it. So I think that's really important. Thank you.
All right, we've got the 4 recommendations there, and look, just as a right of reply, I think it's almost guaranteed that the new standards will affect us positively. So I think we've got to understand what they are, and I don't disagree with majority of the commentary that's been said. In terms of quickening up the process, I'm just unsure how we can do that when we're being dictated to by central government. So it's pretty hard, and I sense that the communication with the community issues as well. Again, what do you tell them when you can't really tell them a huge amount? So other than we're relooking at some things and we're waiting for those standards to come in. Look, I think it might be wise actually, and I'll put this to the officers, that we invite Te Mata Arawai, the water regulator, to come and present to us as a council. I think they have a responsibility, especially to us, because we're probably the first cab off the rank in terms of one of their major consents in the country. So it'd be good to know what they're thinking, and then we can, perhaps all of us can ask some questions that are relevant, and you can hear them direct. Anyway, we have what we have in front of us, and if we could vote, please. That has passed 16 votes for and none against. Thank you. Okay, we move through to number 8, which is for our council submission on the Local Government Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Bill, and I'll ask Julie Keane and Chris to perhaps speak to this. Page 35 of your papers. Thank you.
Morena, everybody. I'm Julie Keane, Transition Manager for Three Waters. We'll take the report generally as read. It's in relation, obviously, to a submission that was presented on behalf of Council for the Local Government Water Services Preliminary Arrangement Bill. I guess off the back of comments being made around central government timelines, this was another one of those situations where the timeline was particularly short, and we have had to apply the Mayor's delegated authority to be able to approve this within a very, very short time frame. Just wanted to touch on the key points to our submission. The Mayor and Chris and I presented to the Finance and Expenditure Committee and generally just highlighted 3 key areas. One was around the extension of time to develop the Water Services Delivery Plan. The draft bill only provided for 12 months, and we thought that that was a particularly tight time frame, and we commented in that regard. The time period that the Water Services Delivery Plan covered it was only indicated that it should cover 10 years within the plan. We felt that with the work that we have been doing across the region, that the 30-year picture is a far more telling one, and as a result of that, we included that within our submission. The other concern we had was around the lack of visibility, in particular around the key pieces of legislation that we know are not going to be introduced until December, and we're going to be coming to councils to make decisions on the options without necessarily that visibility or the level of visibility that we're going to need. So that generally covered the key points within our submission. I just thought I'd take the opportunity to let everybody know, in case you hadn't picked up, that the bill has now passed into law. It was passed effectively on Tuesday. And to the point around the Water Services Delivery Plan, we did have some concerns that they may have asked for that to have been completed within less than a 12-month time frame. Pleased to report that we do now have until the 2nd of September 2025 to present that for submission. The other very, very helpful thing that has occurred as at yesterday is the DIA have issued some guidance material to us around the Water Services Delivery Plan templates, the financial modelling options. There is some really good information that's been issued by the DIA. So I guess thankfully we would say that they have delivered on some of the expectations, that the information that has been provided to us will be helpful to us. Thank you.
Nothing from you, Chris?
I think she covered it well. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Given that we've made quite a few submissions recently to legislative processes and not had any obvious amendments made as a result of them, did you feel that any of the points that we made in the submission were actually taken on board or were actioned?
I'll take that one. Look, I actually think they were listened to, and so for instance, one of our big concerns was around the time frame to do the Water Services Delivery Plan, and we were suggesting that the time frame, the standard time frame, should be longer. And while that wasn't changed, what was changed was there were some more things have gone in to provide extensions of time under certain circumstances. So when I look at that, I think the point that we were making, that it would be very challenging. So the rationale behind our concern was to say, well, we're working very hard with the rest of our colleagues around the region to try and find a good model for water services delivery, and therefore we needed to do that, and then we wanted to do one plan, but in relation to whatever that new arrangement would be, so therefore we could end up coming up tight. And I think I think that was taken on board. So if you look at how the extension of time options work, that has that's pretty much got us what we were worried about, I guess.
So has it been extended to 2 years then?
No.
No. Okay.
But what I'm saying is that the issue that we were raising, our suggestion was 2 years, but they came up with another option, which I think addresses our concerns.
And what about the 30-year timeline instead of a 10-year timeline?
Yep, I think that was taken on board as well. And so what they've said is that they haven't made it mandatory to have a 30-year time frame, but they have given options for. They've acknowledged that that a longer time frame is potentially important, and given options to have a longer, 20 to 30 year as part of your plan.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, that is questions done. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Chris. So, councillors, we have a recommendation there to council that we note the submission on the Local Government Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Bill, Attachment 1. I'm happy to move it, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Just further to some of the questioning there, in speaking to the Minister, those very same questions about the timeframes, and his response to me was, there will be opportunities for an extension to the plan, but it wasn't a given for every single council. So, for instance, if we're looking at pulling together all our colleagues around us, and we do need a little bit more time to collate everybody's data and information and get that into a plan that's workable. And we're getting close, but we're going to rush it by, a couple of months. Then I think the call could be made for an extension, and I think there'd be a likely positive response because they know we're working on things and we're getting close. I think they just didn't want to open the floodgates on every single council. Some are more advanced than others, so that's all I can say. Okay, there being no other comments, we will vote, please. That is passed, 16 votes for, none against. Thank you. Good time to have a little break. So we're back in the chamber at 11:15. So thank you, and we'll see those online. Thank you.
Tēnā tātou, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to be looking at item number 9, and the title of this paper presented is International Travel Proposed for Mayor in November 2024. I'd like to invite to the table, she's already there, well done, our Manager of International Relations, Gabrielle Loga, tēnā koe whā, Gabriel, and also Hannah, who is with us, and she will be, both of them will be responding to any questions you have after after Gabriel has introduced this to us. So over to you. Thank you, Gabriel.
Morena koutou, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to present this report. Palmerston North has been a long-standing member of Sister Cities New Zealand, and now formerly known as Global City New Zealand. And the mayor is the current national president. He has been invited in this capacity by the Chinese People's Association of Friendship with Foreign Countries to attend the China's International Friendship Cities Conference in Kunming in November. And the invitation extends that all accommodation and meals cost within China is going to be covered by the Chinese People Association of Friendship with Foreign Countries, and the international travel cost is going to be covered by Global Cities New Zealand. We have been communicating with a city called Fuzhou in China. It was introduced to us by the Embassy of the People's Republic of China in 2022. And after consulting with our International Education Leadership Group, we decided to start communication with Fuzhou and developed a letter of intent as in attachment, I think 2. For your information, now the letter of intent says that we are willing and open to explore collaborative opportunities in the education sector with this particular city. And there is, of course, always scope for extending it to other sectors should the exploration of opportunities indicates that we should do so. So the opportunity for us to take advantage of this international travel, should it be approved by Council, is that the Fuzhou Foreign Affairs Office has offered to cover domestic travel for the mayor to go from where the conference is held to Fuzhou City to attend the Fuzhou's Tourism and Culture Festival and the 2024 International Friendship City Festival in Fuzhou. The purpose of this is to connect in person with our new partner. This would be the first time we do so, and there are 2 opportunities within there. The first one being that we can promote Palmerston North as a hidden gem of New Zealand travel at the Fuzhou's Tourism Festival. This would be contributing to increase the number of international visitors to the city. The second being signing the letter of intent to explore collaborative opportunities in education, which would then contribute to increase the number of educational partnerships and ultimately the number of international fee-paying students to our Palmerston North. And of course, this has been proposed to be at no cost to Council. Therefore, we thought that it would be quite exciting for us to leverage this opportunity. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any question.
Thank you, Gabriel. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thanks, Gabrielle. What budget is the proposed 1,500 coming out of?
So, as described, the partners are proposing to cover all of the expenses. The 1,500 proposed is for incidentals only, and we actually don't expect for it to be up to that level. However, should that arise, then it would come out of the international relations budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Yes, thank you. It sounds quite interesting and quite beneficial for Palmerston. Who would I sort of be going with the mayor from, like the education sector, from the tourism sector, or is he just going by himself? And also from council.
Through the chair, it is proposed that the mayor will be travelling alone at this stage, given the tight timeline, and this was not budgeted for in our international relations annual plan.
Okay, so there'll be no staff with them at all?
No, no staff.
Thank you.
That's the end of our questions. I'm just bringing us back to the recommendations to council, of which I'm happy to move, that the council approve the Mayor's travel to China from the 16th of November until the 26th of November 2024, and secondly, that the council approve up to $1,500 of incidental costs associated with the Mayor's travel to China from the 16th of November until the 26th of November 2024. And thank you. Councillor Hapeta is prepared to second that. Any comments? There being no comments, can I please ask that we vote on that? Thank you. That has passed to nil and carried. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Did a good job. Okay, we now move forward to number 10, which is around the Infrastructure New Zealand delegation to the United Kingdom, and it's from our CE, Wade Crockett. So, Wade, all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. I also just extend my appreciation to the elected members for allowing me to attend this delegation. I think it was particularly useful. What I've tried to do in the report is just outline sort of the key areas that were covered off, rather than going through on a day-by-day blow of what actually occurred on each of the days in each of the cities. Talking about water services infrastructure, the regional city deals programs and other infrastructure that was looked at through the course of the 3 days. So I visited 3 cities across the 5 days, as outlined in the report. Excuse me, as outlined in the report, each delegate was asked to prepare a section which then generated the report that's provided in attachment 1. I think the report actually covers off quite nicely some of the key findings, some of the key issues and things that we discovered through the course of that particular week. And then what I've tried to do in the report is then provide that back in terms of what that might mean for New Zealand Inc. as well as Palmerston North City, and back and relating that back to some of the work that we've got coming forward. I guess some of the key points I'll just sort of highlight was some of the things that have been in place in the UK for quite a number of years demonstrated a very high level of commitment, particularly at the political level, both at local government and at national government level, in order to make things like city deals work. Across the water services area, there are some common themes: failing infrastructure or lack of investment in infrastructure over long periods of time, and some things work a little bit differently in the UK than what they do here. For instance, and I've mentioned in the report as well, that stormwater is conveyed through the wastewater network, which causes a considerable amount of overflows and issues in the UK environment, where that's a little bit different to what we experience here, although we do experience infiltration into the network as a result of high stormwater levels and things and that from time to time. In terms of stormwater, I know that our strategic planning team are looking at a citywide stormwater assessment. I think that will be particularly useful for us moving forward, thinking about other visits that have occurred over our time, thinking about recent visits to China, for instance, where we had a delegation looking at things like sponge city environments and how that might work within the Palmerston North City environment. So I think that those things will be quite important for us. Other key points out of the delegation, the water models that are in the UK. Obviously, there's a high level of privatisation to water networks. Probably the site visit, or the visit that we had that was closest to ours, was probably the Welsh Water model, although that was a private not-for-profit type model, probably similar to how the trust models have been established through the new Three Waters legislation, but it doesn't provide that headroom under those models in New Zealand under the new legislation than what we would get through a CCO model. So there were some similarities, but then there's also some differences around privatisation in the UK, whereas there's no sign of that ever occurring. In fact, there's the legislation won't allow for that to occur as well in the future. Moving into things such as the regional deals, obviously the gold standard regional deal in the UK is the Manchester City deal. Probably a key theme across water and regional deals is scale, and that's something that our council will be putting its mind to when we start thinking about decisions around CCO models for local water done well, programs and the like. Scale is effectively king. It's you're able to kind of leverage off some of the assets and spread the infrastructure load across larger areas, which makes it a little bit more affordable in the UK, and also the introduction, which they've had for quite some time, of an economic regulator that focuses on outcomes rather than necessarily price to some extent, but it is an important feature to make sure that CCOs or water bodies don't necessarily start charging extraordinary amounts that put pressure on those that have the ability to, or those to have the ability to pay for those sorts of things. Probably another key feature again of regional deals in the UK, as I mentioned, is scale. We're talking about areas that have that are larger than the population of our entire country, that have regional deals, city deals in place. and there are different levels of deals in the UK. It doesn't mean that it's not possible here, but it does mean that we just have to think about what's appropriate for our area as well as the region or wider in terms of what a city deal or regional deal might look like for us. There certainly be some, what I would consider some courageous decision making and perhaps even taking some level of risk associated with establishing city and regional deals in the future as well. And the other key feature of it is actually having some really key stakeholders in place, iwi at our end, business sector, others, as well as a critical part of making sure that these deals work moving forward. Just in light of that, the government has released a framework now. I put some details about that, of what the priority areas are for those. There's also some secondary areas or objectives in the structure. It's pretty similar to what's been established in the UK, but it's a work in progress from my perspective, and some things that we would need to think about internally about how it is that we start working on this, who the partners are, getting others involved, and getting moving with it, and what other things that we might need to put aside if council, if you decide that this is an area that we want to push forward through quite rapidly. So I'll just leave it there for the time being. Happy to take some questions in relation to it.
Thanks, Wade. A couple of questions from me. Those water entities that you did see, their assets, were they part of councils, or were they just totally separate, like a power utility that was not really connected to the local government aspect?
No, they were separated from the councils. Yeah, they were owned by the companies.
Right. Okay. And in 3.6 through to 3.7, you talk about the stormwater infrastructure, and it didn't really exist over there. Is that right?
Yeah. So what happens with stormwater in the UK, particularly in the metro areas, London and the like, where developers have effectively a right to connect their stormwater into the wastewater network. So they've got a forward program of upgrading their wastewater networks in order to be able to cope with the enormous amounts of stormwater that are actually coming through it. As you can imagine, with metro centres such as London, Manchester and a few other places, dealing with volumes of stormwater that are coming off hard surfaces must be an extraordinary thing to have to deal with.
And quite costly, I would think, too. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, I'll just go to questions. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Wade. Wade, just want to really just talk about the regional deals, and I just wonder if you've got any sort of comments about the funding arrangements between central and local governments in the UK. And you mentioned also scale is king. So in terms of those regional deals, I guess if you've got any comments around sort of the metro provincial mix in terms of being able to actually access funding.
Yeah, so there's a range of different levels of deals in the UK. So you've got if we use the Manchester City deal as an example, where these deals have evolved over a very long period of time, and they're starting to move towards now where effectively bulk funding is actually provided to the city or the region that administers it, and what happens is that they effectively invest that money and then use that to effectively loan or borrow against, and it's almost like a perpetual fund in some regards. So it actually has enough in it that actually starts generating its own, revenue from it, but then continues to borrow against it over a period of time. I And then you've got others that go down to what I would call town centre or town revitalisation type, so almost project type based deals that are in place that actually look to kind of create some economic activity by revitalising townships or cities or other deals in place in that as well. So there's a whole scale of different things in between. The key part of it again is having a champion a champion at the central government level that actually makes these things work, and in an approach that actually crosses over crosses all parties. So effectively, you actually have something in place that it will stand the test of time. The issue we have in New Zealand, and as you've already experienced from previous papers already today, is that a change of policy at the central government level effectively either undoes or changes the direction drastically in which we're having to do, and we're having to rework things. So I think that kind of answers your question, but you might have a follow-up.
Lots of follow-ups here, Wade. I'll just keep an eye on this. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Wade. A couple questions. My first one would follow up on the comment before in response. Just trying to understand this bulk funding. Is that just like bulk debt that is accessible through to local communities, or like where does that money come from?
Yes, coming out of central government. So I would just need to check the perhaps just take that one on notice, councillor, and come back to you on it, on the mechanisms of how that's provided out of central government. As it appears to be a grant type funding, but I don't know whether then that's loan funded at the central government level and then provided to the entities or not. I'd just need to check that and come back to you.
Thank you. And on that, in terms of the models that are being explored in New Zealand, are you aware of how that might work? Is it simply greater access to debt, or are we actually looking at investment coming to communities?
Yeah, again, the framework that's been put out currently at the moment, it's pretty. It requires a little bit more work in that particular regard to actually understand what that would mean for a city or a region, and where the funding is coming from for these particular projects as well. So that's still a bit of work in progress.
Thank you. And finally, we've heard quite a bit of the positives on this, and I think those are quite clear. Just do you have any view around any notes of caution or things that we might want to be particularly aware of moving forward?
Yeah, yeah, there are. I think that it will just be making sure that the things around the city regional deals is who are the partners, what are we focusing in on, how do we make sure that we get everyone that might be, for instance, are there neighbours around us that we're wanting to include in a city regional deal? What does that look like? What does that mean for them? Who are the business partners? Having iwi around the table as well. All of those sorts of things. I think that's probably the part, is just making sure that the objectives or what it is that we're trying to achieve, that we've got some agreement around that. I think that will always kind of be part of it, if that makes sense.
That's helpful, thank you. And sorry, just very finally, in terms of your actual time on the ground in the UK, did you get to talk to elected members in local government to any extent, or was it more kind of presentations from consultants and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, they were. So we did have some presentations Yeah, there was some that had been in the political space. Most of it was from officers from, for instance, the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities. It's a pretty cool name for a government department. But so it was mostly at their management level. The thing for us was that we were there in the time when the elections were on. And so government officials had to be a little bit more cautious about what it is that they could say or couldn't say in regards to some matters in that as well. But yeah, mostly at sort of management officer level in each of those particular organisations.
Great, excellent, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Wade. I'm interested in just exploring a bit more about the Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water model. So I don't quite understand how it was able to be financed through private capital markets without government support. Was that entirely through lending without any expectation of return? How did they achieve that?
I think actually, just checking back on it as well, Councillor, I think that they were provided some level of government support initially to get it actually up off the ground.
Right.
And it did have a different model before the one that it currently exists now.
Mm-hmm.
And so there might have been some transfer of some of the assets and the like from the previous structure that was in place to what currently exists now. Effectively, it was almost a private buyout. It's quite an interesting model because quite interesting to sort of see, private equity involved with it, but actually it's operating on a not-for-profit basis. And their principles around it are to create growth, economic activity, and those sorts of things, because they realise that the core infrastructure, the Three Waters in particular, is things that actually generate that sort of activity. So there's kind of a flow-on economic activity associated with it. They have quite high-profile board members that sit in there, so it's a very skills-based board as well, which helps them kind of navigate what's quite an interesting model that's set up.
And you said that was the one that you thought perhaps had the most potential for a similar model here?
Yeah, it is. Again, because, our role in councils is actually to try and provide, infrastructure and these services to our community at the most affordable cost that we possibly can. And that's kind of what the Welsh Water model is trying to do, but it's got a secondary component to it where it helps generate economic activity as well in key areas for business growth and jobs and those sorts of things.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that's our questions done. Thanks, Wade. Appreciate you coming online to present that. So we'll just get the recommendation back up there, councillors. And it's around the council received the report titled Infrastructure New Zealand Delegation, United Kingdom 2024, presented to council on the 4th of September 2024. I'll look to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Again, I think some of the learnings there around city/regional deals, very interesting. I'm intrigued about some of the water stuff, and it's remembering that the UK's a lot more mature in this space than we are. So sometimes it's good not to be an early adopter or the first cab off the rank, and to perhaps just watch what some other I suppose some other countries that are very similar to us have done in the past. So I think there'll be some learnings out of that. So appreciate the report. All right, there being no other comments, we will vote, please. passed 16 votes for and none against. Thank you. Moving through to number 11, which is around elected members meeting stats for July 1/23 to June 24, and I'll invite Hannah, our governance manager, just to speak to that. That's page 103 of your papers.
Ata Maria. For those of you that are history geeks, I did a bit of I got my team last night to do a little bit of homework on where these attendance statistics have come from, and the volition of previous councils to make sure that they are showing their accountability back to the public. And the most recent resolution on this topic was 2008. And that was a resolution that resolved that the 50% of a meeting would count as a whole meeting. And there was a 2006 resolution prior to that, which was the resolution on the definition of if someone was absent from a meeting because they were busy doing other council business, that they would be marked as an attendance. So just thought you might be interested in that, simply because, I want to understand a little bit more behind why we do this paper, that we want to, show that accountability back to the public. So happy to take any questions.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Hannah. So, and I'm not as over the dates as you are, but in my time on council, I recall we have moved from recording attendance at workshops and briefings, and we've also moved from recording attendance at meetings at committee meetings of which you're not a member. So, how did those changes come about?
The previous two councils, so the current one and the one prior to that, any level of detail was agreed and communicated to elected members by that mayor, and that was done in writing following the election. So yes, you're correct. In October 2022, elected members were communicated to by the mayor, explaining that for this term of council, the intention was that if you were a member of a committee, attendance would be taken, and that it was expected that all elected members would attend workshops, but that attendance would only be taken for the meetings of which you're a member, and of course that you're all a member of council, so both council and the committees.
Okay, and so governance then stopped taking attendance at workshops?
That's correct. We haven't taken those records this term of council.
So you're not able to say whether that change in recording had an effect on attendance at workshops?
Because I haven't got the statistics this term, I cannot give you that answer, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Hannah. In your comment, you said this is about our accountability back to the public. So what else forms that picture of accountability back to the public apart from this very narrow report?
That you are in attendance at meetings is already reported every time you do your minutes. It's also now broadcast to the public that they can watch it at any time as well. But all elected members are very aware that this report and this way of showing attendance at meetings is such a small part of what you do as elected members, and the breadth of what you are a part of. There's no way for governance as a staff team to record that and present that in a way that's useful to the public. So it is a very limited report. We have quite a wide definition of council business, as we've discussed in the expenses report a couple of times, in the expenses policy, and also which was followed up most recently with the Remuneration Authority survey of elected member time, which specifically listed what it expected elected members were busy with, that was, of course, the formal meetings and the preparation time for those formal meetings. It was the workshops. It was preparing for and representing at the variety of community events. It was meeting with your constituents. It was communicating with your constituents, whether that was, you know, on the telephone or email. And also, they also still had a breadth of other council-related activities. So the breadth is not covered here, but is well understood, I hope.
Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just thought it might be relevant to mention that I have a few additional recommendations just in case members have any questions of governance on those.
Yep, I'm going to take this first, and then
Okay.
if this fails and it doesn't supersede any of your extra ones.
No, there are additional
Yeah,
recommendations.
I realised that.
I just thought I'd flag that anyway.
Does anybody want to ask any questions of that? No. Okay. All right. So Hannah, I mean, a few questions around what I suppose every 3 years people make a decision on whether they think we've advocated for them well enough. I mean, obviously these attendance stats are a pretty blunt tool, but they are what they are. So the other tools you're talking about were, I suppose, councillor queries, that when somebody advocates for something and it comes back via your system. That's another one, is it?
That's certainly data that I have available.
Yeah. Obviously, although we don't do it, and members have other roles and other parts of their lives, but attending various community events is another.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've just got a question just in terms of the recommendation 2 there, where elected members have been given at least 4 weeks' notice regarding the workshop or briefing. I just wonder if I could get a comment in terms of the practicalities of that. Thank you.
It would make it quite a fiddly business for us, if I'm honest. From our perspective, we would have to, I mean, it's not impossible. We could create a system that says, you know, we could have a spreadsheet of those that were more than 4 weeks notice and those that were less, and then we could include the less than 4 weeks notice in our non-attendant, in our attendance stats in general, but not as the compulsory ones. It's possible. What I'd note though, is that if the intention is to show elected members' commitment to their role as elected members, then there will certainly be meetings at less than 4 weeks' notice that would be of serious import, because for the very reason that they are urgent matters. An extraordinary meeting would be an example of that, where the legislation requires that we give you 3 days' notice, and the public too. So I can see examples where it might not quite fit your intentions.
Okay, thanks, Hannah. That's the questions done. So look, I'm happy to move one and look for a seconder. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. All right, so one is around the council received. We'll just do one first and then we'll go to the additional ones later. That council received the memorandum titled Elected Members Meeting Attendance Stats for 1 July 23 to 30 June, dated 4th September 24. For information. Look, councillors, as I said earlier, they are a fairly blunt tool, but there are other ways, and of course you get judged every 3 years on what you do. I'll speak now and I'll keep quiet on the rest of them. I'm not going to support any of the others because I do think we're just diving into real detail, and I think as elected members here we've got some major issues to deal with around other things for our community that really worrying about our own attendances, I think is pretty low priority. We'd put something out at the beginning of the year. That was the time to have a bit of a talk, a chat about it. If there was any real angst about it, we'd set up committees, and the majority of you voted for it, where there was separate membership, because previously we'd had membership, everyone was just a member of every committee. If you want to go back to that, then perhaps that's a discussion for another time, but my understanding is you don't, because some of you have other roles, other jobs, and hence you cannot get to every single meeting, and you're not on every single committee, and you use your time wisely. And also, where does it all stop? Do we start counting community events? And some of you are exceptionally good at going to things, and some of you don't come to much because you've got other priorities. So I just think I'm just not sure what we're trying to do here, other than perhaps appease a couple of elected members' view on it. So I won't be supporting any of the others, and it's slightly nanny state, if I can be really honest. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to propose an amendment, which is seconded by Councillor Dennison, to take out the 4 weeks' notice for number 2, because I do broadly support the intent of number 2, but I do think that 4 weeks' notice is just going to be too complex and difficult. And just in terms of the inclusion of workshops and briefings, my anecdotal observation is that attendance at workshop has been a lot less this term than it was in previous terms. And I don't have any stats to back that up because I haven't been taking notes, but there have been many workshops and briefings where there's been very few elected members present, and I don't think that that is helpful. So if recording attendance at workshops is what it takes to improve attendance, then so be it. And I think to your point that we had our opportunity to say about that at the start of the term, I don't think we foresaw that reducing the attendance stats on workshops would lead to a reduction in attendance, but it certainly seems to have done. So I will support the 2, 3 and 4, 2 with the amendment to remove where elected members have been given at least 4 weeks' notice, because I think if we're given the statutory notice, then it's down to us to prioritise council business. And I have also noted that I think, half attendance at a meeting isn't really, I don't think it's a good measure to then say that person was present for the whole meeting. Anyway, just my short points. So if we could just change that on number 2, please. Thanks.
Yep, that's not a problem. We'll just take number 1 first, and then we'll come to number 2. But yep, your amendment's noted. So, Councillor Nadi, do you want to comment on number 1?
I'd actually like to speak to the other 3, and given that your introductory remarks have covered all 4, I think it would make sense to actually be able to speak to the other 3 prior to everyone else commenting on it. So I'm happy to do that now. So just to outline the additional recommendations, given the comments made by Councillor Johnson, myself and the mover are quite happy to remove that phrase about the 4 weeks' notice, if that is seen as problematic. It was added following the email out to all elected members last night, following one person's feedback that perhaps that would be useful in terms of having a reasonable expectation on notice. But certainly it's not a sticking point to me. I'm happy if that's deleted rather than having to treat it as an amendment. Just my rationale for proposing this, yes, of course it's not the most important thing on council business, but if it is something that we report to our community, I think it needs to be meaningful and more complete than what it is at the moment. Yes, it's absolutely a blunt tool and does not cover at all every aspect of councillors' performance, and I'm certainly not suggesting that it is. Also, the changes that were made to committee structure and only recording attendance for the committees that you're on, these recommendations do not seek to change any of that also. That would all be unchanged. Last time this report came to council, I think it was Councillor Johnson that did ask the reason why we weren't recording workshops and briefings, and I certainly share the observation that Councillor Johnson has made that there are times where attendance does appear to be lower than what I think it should be at those workshops. And I think in terms of completeness, if this is a report accountability to our community, there's many, many days and hours, and when I think of those some of those full-day workshops last year, LTP workshops, that this council sat working very hard, I think those things should be reported to our community as part of that reporting back. So the two main things that these recommendations seek to change is the inclusion of workshops and briefings, which, as Hannah's pointed out, has always been the practice the 6 years prior to this term. So that's just bringing that back in. And the second change is lifting that threshold from 50% to 75%. And my observations when I read through, I just thought, how did we land on 50%? The bar just seemed a little bit low on that. So 3 and 4 are just lifting that threshold to 75%, which really does still allow a period of time that if someone needs to dash out for something that can't be changed, then that accommodates that. But on the old rules, you know, someone could turn up to just over half of every meeting and the report to the community would still be full attendance, and I don't think that's quite a high enough standard that I'm comfortable with to support.
Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to give notice that I've got another recommendation if 2 onwards pass. Simply, I just want to point out that on a Wednesday at 4:30, as a Monday and Friday as well, at 4:30 I deal with youth in the community, which is something I don't take lightly. Been doing it since 1999. And some of the youth I deal with are struggling, shall we say, with lots of things in life, and they need that security. They need a safe place, and to a lot of them it's the only safe place. So to have workshops and briefings at 4:30 on a Wednesday afternoon makes it really tight for me to get to them. So I do leave a lot of them. So what I'm giving notice of is the recommendation that I'm putting up, that if this goes through, if these others go through, I'd like to see workshops and briefings, either mornings or lunchtimes on alternative days to Wednesdays. I don't give a continental how much we're ticked off and marked and all the rest of it, but I do have an issue with how long going. When I first started on council, when I first sought election, council started at like 4 in the afternoon, 4:30 in the afternoon, at 5 o'clock, and went evenings. As soon as I was elected, the mayor of the time wanted to move it back to 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Monday, it was. We got it through that it was 2 o'clock start. It was a very short time after that, it went to 9 o'clock start. Then we moved to a Wednesday at 9 o'clock. It takes a full day. So I understand, I don't have an issue with any of the stuff. What I have an issue with is we have other things where we work in the community, working with the community, and it makes it awkward to find other people to fill in at times for us. So, thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. What we'll do is we'll vote on one, and then we'll come back to the additional ones and any amendments thereafter. So we're just going to vote on number 1 now, please. That has passed 16 votes for and none against. All right, we'll move through to number 2. Well, sorry, we'll take the amendment first to number 2. Okay. Okay, Just give us a moment while we... Okay, number 2 is that the CE report 6 monthly and annually elected members' attendance at meetings, workshops and briefings according to the number of attendances, non-attendances on council business and non-attendances for other reasons. That's moved by Councillor Naylor and Councillor Barrett. So Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to ask a question, if I might. Your commentary and Councillor Naylor's commentary caused a bit of confusion for me, so I just want to be clear. My understanding was the same as Councillor Naylor's, that this wouldn't lead to reporting on meetings that members aren't a committee of, or in a committee of, but if read to the letter, recommendation 2 does just say elected members' attendance at meetings. Could that be amended to say at meetings they are members of the committee or council? Just so it's explicitly clear that we are not suggesting that if you're not a member of the committee, we're going to start reporting your attendance at that. Because I think we all agree that's fair. I appreciate it's in 3 and 4, it's just not in 2, so. Or is that fine?
I'm being told it's okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So my understanding is that these go together, and so I would certainly be interpreting number 2 as defined by 3 and 4 below it.
Okay. In that case, I'm comfortable. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief comment. First, to thank Councillor Naylor for the discussions and bringing this forward. I'm certainly happy to support them. My fundamental view is that transparency is the foundation of accountability, and I think it's quite reasonable that we are transparent with the community around where our activities lay. And I think this is a way of stepping up from what others have described as a fairly low bar to something that's a bit more appropriate, I think, for the times. And, you know, absolutely agree that we have major issues to deal with at this table. That's why we should be here. It's that simple. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to write a reply, Councillor? Okay, all right. We're going to vote on 2, 3 and 4 together because they sort of all go together. All right, is everyone okay with that? Okay, we'll vote now, please. And there's 12 votes for and 4 against. Okay, we've still got one more to go. We'll get that up. If we can get it up, then we can. So, Councillor Meehan, are you happy with what's on screen there, that workshops are held on a morning or a lunchtime and not on a council committee meeting day? Okay. You don't need to speak any more to that, do you?
Just follow on, just to make sure that it was understood, that the reason I have morning or lunchtimes is, like, say, on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm unavailable from 4:30 till 8 o'clock. I don't mind coming back at 8 o'clock on those evenings, no problem at all. But like I say, I think fair is fair in all war and peace. But would really like to push the issue here that if we're going to do this, or we have done this, that it be fair on all, and we do this on alternative days of the week, either morning or lunchtime. Thank you.
Okay, we've opened up a few discussions. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll speak reasonably briefly. I'm sorry, Councillor Mann, I normally agree with you, but this one I find a little bit difficult. So when I sought employment after being elected, I said to my employer, look, I'm blocking out all of Wednesday, I won't be available, but we won't have meetings Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Occasionally there are, and I can make those flexible. So if this was to get through, at the very least we need to make it clear, right, this is Tuesday from 9 till midday, that's when we have our workshops. I don't like the idea that it's just any random day that's not a council day. Sometimes it's a Friday and sometimes it's a Monday, and I would hope that in practice that's not what would happen, but I don't like the way this is worded. I worry about what it would lead to, particularly if we have a very short meeting. Say today we finished at 11 a.m, they went, right, we're going to go home for the day. We've got nothing else to do because we're not allowed to have workshops on a council day, full stop. So I just don't think it gives us the flexibility we need. We can hold workshops. In fact, last week we held a local water done well briefing on a Tuesday. You know, it can happen at the moment that when a Wednesday's blocked out, that workshops spill over onto other days. So I'm quite happy with the way that it works at the moment. I can appreciate from the council's perspective that their particular issue is that after 4:30 p.m. they've got prior commitments, but for me from 9 till 2:30 on a Tuesday I have prior commitments. So I guess trying to put into council rules what times we can and can't hold things, although I appreciate the intent, it's just going to make it very difficult because we all have very complex and different things we're doing with our lives. So unfortunately I'm not going to support this, but I appreciate where you're coming from and think it would be useful in this discussion now that we are county tenants of workshops, if we do have a discussion with all councillors about what times generally are absolute no-goes, to see if we can find compromise. Because absolutely I don't think we should be holding workshops at 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. if Councillor Meehan can never attend those workshops. You know, that wouldn't be fair. So I'm more than happy to have a discussion, but I think trying to write it to the letter just isn't the right way to go about it. I'm sorry.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Unfortunately, I won't be supporting this recommendation. I think it doesn't quite fully appreciate is the wide perspective of the other professional responsibilities that members carry and personal commitments to other activities outside our life as elected members. And Wednesdays keeps it very clear. I'd rather have a filled up day of Wednesdays rather than being, you know, free to go early afternoon or whatever because there's nothing planned because meetings thought they'd go longer. I'd rather get a concentration of need around that and not have it creep into other days of the week when it's, you know, it's that ad hoc nature. And so, yeah, and I appreciate the concern, but I think it highlights the need of one member, but not the whole. And we all have other commitments and at times to compromise with the needs, but we weigh those up with consideration as need be. But I won't be supporting this. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Mr Mayor and councillors. I too support Councillor Wood and Councillor Dennison's comments. It would be very problematic for me given the commitments that I have. I've had a really good employer who knows when I'm not there, I'm here. When I'm here, I'm not there. So I'm really grateful to them for that. But one of the things that Councillor Meehan had mentioned, and I do see where he's wanting to come from, is possibly, you know, I would be prepared to work in the evening as well if it meant, you know, coming back after those work hours. It's interesting because some people in the community are under the misapprehension that we all work full-time for council. And that is a misapprehension because we do have other professional responsibilities, as Councillor Dennison said, and even community responsibilities outside of our work as well. So it would be very problematic for me to rejig those, but so I won't be supporting this for those reasons. Thank you.
So before we come back to you, Councillor, I suppose this is an unforeseen consequence of what you just voted for, if I can be really honest and frank. But look, as I control the work schedule in a sense, I will certainly do my best to ensure that Councillor Meehan's not left out, and we don't schedule something that's too. But you know, we've just voted for something which has created some angst, in my opinion. For this very reason. So I can't really support this because the greater good of everybody is tougher. But I will give you an understanding that we won't be scheduling things at 4:30 to make sure that you can get away and you're not left out of the discussion. But it is an unforeseen consequence of what has just gone down, unfortunately. Councillor Mann, right a reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Understandable, and it's exactly what I expected everybody, because everybody has other jobs besides Wednesday. So maybe another recommendation that we shift council to a Tuesday or a Thursday, full day, all night. I have no problem with that. Everybody agreeable with that? I'd be happy for a Tuesday or Thursday.
So, council, we might take that conversation offline, but no, seriously, it's a conversation up for grabs. Yep.
So I couldn't put another recommendation or motion forward now.
I can't stop you from, if you want to put something up, we can do that.
Well, I'd like to put that forward, that either a Thursday or Tuesday. Do I have a second or a third day?
Have we got a seconder?
Count.
It's actually a right of reply first. You're going to have to do that separately. Right.
I'll do that separately.
We're going to vote on this one first. Right, so number 5, that workshops are held on the morning or a lunchtime, but not on a council committee meeting day. Councillor Meehan and second by Councillor Happer. So can you vote, please? And that has failed. 13 votes, 3 votes for, 13 votes against. Okay. Now, Councillor Meehan, is that what you were proposing? That council and committee meetings and briefings and workshops are held on a Thursday, effectively following formal notification procedures are completed. Moved by you, second by Councillor Johnson. All right. Would you like to speak to that?
I realise the difficulty this may cause for some people, but as everybody's pointed out, they have work obligations and they put a full day aside. I think it can be simply arranged with your employer that you shift that full day. Whereas this allows us to do the job that we've offered to the public to do. And as I've pointed out, I realise other people aren't in the same situation as I am, and I'm not in your situation. But I have a commitment to community that I don't get paid for, okay? And I'd like to still be able to do that. So this is why, hence, move this. And like I say, we can party all day Thursday and all night. No problem at all, because I can be there. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I want to move a procedural motion that we lie this on the table, ready for the report on next year's calendar.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Naylor, and no more discussion, we'll just get it up on.
No, that's coming to the 2nd of October meeting.
Councillor Bowen, could you just repeat your procedural motion?
That this lie on the table until the discussion of next year's calendar, which I think is down for the 2nd of October council meeting.
Moved by Councillor Bowen, seconded by Councillor Naylor. And there's no discussion. So what we'll do is we'll get number 7 up and you'll vote on that, and it's a procedural motion. So there's no discussion. Either vote yes or no. Or abstain if you want to. Yes, it's referring to recommendation 6, yeah. All right. We're ready to vote. And it's passed 4 votes for and 2 against. Okay. Is there anything else that we need to go? No. All right, we're finally done on that one, thank goodness. Okay, back to normality. Right, number 12, council work schedule, and that's on page 107, and it's from our Deputy CE, Chris. Is there any comments to that?
No comment.
Oh, there is. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. A question to officers just around changes from the last edition of this a month ago. There's a question then about that version of which had some annual budget stuff set down in December. And my understanding of the response a month ago was that some information would be circulated to elected members around annual budget process. I'm wondering what's happened.
I think finance is still working on it, but I'll just get that confirmed. Cam.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yep, we have got a draft sort of series of dates that we are just working through at the moment that will be circulated to you. I guess the aim is to try and spread the workload out a little bit to perhaps what occurred last year. So we're just trying to make sure that the dates actually make sense and that we can actually achieve the program before we circulate.
Thanks. When could we expect to receive that information?
I'd say it's not too far away, and certainly has been locked in with, I guess, the draft calendar for next year as well, ensuring that the dates actually line up with council committee meetings and other council meetings.
So would it be reasonable to expect it in September?
I'd say next. I can circulate that to you probably next week or so.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to ask a question about the amendment to the resolution regarding Māori wards as to the council officers coming back with information on not holding a binding referendum. I was under the understanding that would potentially be coming back to this meeting, but obviously it's not in today's, but I don't see it on the work schedule. So when are we expecting that report back?
That's a work in progress, and it'll be before Christmas.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask a question of staff around the effectiveness of civics education initiatives. And on your progress, it says TBC. And I just want to get an indication of whether we're going to probably receive a report before the election.
The work for that paper had to be reallocated following the organisational realignment. So it should be done before the election. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
I was expecting to see some work scheduled around the water services delivery model, because I understand that we've got decision making to make about that coming up quite fast. Should that be in there?
Absolutely.
Yes, it will be. That's still something that we're working on, but you're right, it needs to be scheduled into the program.
Okay.
Yep. Good point, and we'll just ensure that perhaps we might even, once those dates are in, we'll perhaps recirculate this so you've all got plenty of idea. Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Thanks. Just regarding item 24, the Summer Hayes reports, partnership models, expressions of interest, that some of that direction was given in February, and it just seems a long time to wait till next year. And I think at a recent, some of us expressed an interest in getting at least some sort of update on what work is being done in that direction before next year. Is that able to happen, or do we need to give direction through council to us for that, or will that occur as a matter of course?
There is some work that is going on, and we're putting together we are scoping out a paper to come to council just to give a bit of an update and seek some guidance on how to take that forward. So that is underway, David.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. If elected members recall, there was also a related resolution about investigating alternative service delivery models for social housing, and a resolution regarding Summer Hayes, and a resolution regarding a wider property review, looking at CCO models. So what we're looking at doing is bringing back a paper that talks about all the connections between those resolutions, and then a scope and a program of works to go forward so that there's clarity. So there's a series of resolutions that relate to property and social housing that need to be pulled together.
And I guess the question is, what's the time frame for that update, and could that be included in the work program?
Yeah, the skeleton of that report has come to SLT. I'd anticipate it'll be, I just have to connect in with Wade, but it will be before the end of the year.
Thank you.
All right. From being straightforward to quite a few questions, but anyway, we'll get that work schedule amended and back out to everybody as well. I'll pass that I'll move that we receive it, 4th of September 2024, second to the Deputy Mayor, thank you. And a little bit of work to be done there in the background around the dates. All vote, please. Has passed 16 votes for, none against. All right, move through to number 13, and that's around recommendations from our Strategic and Finance Committee of the 14th of August 2024. I ask the Chair, Councillor Dennison, to speak to those.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just simply to move that Council adopt the recommendations from the Strategy and Finance Committee of the 14th of August.
And seconder from Councillor Naylor. Are there any matters arising? There being none, we will vote, please. It has passed 15 votes for, 1 abstention. Okay, we're now going to look to exclude the public and move into part 2 for negotiation third-party commercial reasons, and I'll look to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, and we will look to vote, please. There's passed 16 votes for and none against. All right, just a couple of minutes while we prepare the room.